Welcome witches to today's video, which is going to be our March reading wrap up. And let me tell you, I killed it last month. And I don't know how I feel about that. Last month I read 16 books, which is probably one of the most books I've ever read in a month. I will say I did have quite a few pretty short books. I think that kind of lended to why I read so many books. Let's talk about how many pages. I tried to keep track of how many pages I read versus listened to, because some of these I did audio only, some of these I did a mix, and then some of these I read only. I read 1,511 pages, which is a lot less than I want to read, which I think also lends to why I read so much, is I did a lot more audiobook reading last month than typical. I don't want to do that. I also did do, though, a lot more listening to audiobooks while running. For instance, I read Catabasis. That was the one that I really enjoyed reading while running, just because I could kind of just like get lost and really focus on it, because there is a lot of plot. But there was also ones like, for instance, The Mysterious Case of the Missing Crime Writer. I kind of read because I just wanted it over with, and it just felt like kind of a way to get it over with. The same would be true for Sign Here. So there was a couple of books that I kind of like hate listened to, and I could kind of take that aggression out in my running. So I spent 48 hours last month listening to audiobooks. Let's talk about ratings. My average rating was 3.33. Not one of my stronger months, but I feel like I had some really high highs and some really low lows. Did not DNF anything, which I've really only DNF'd one book this year, and that is The Bone Orchard, which was like back in January. Let's just get right into my books and what I read. Let's start off with one that I read throughout the month, which was A Thousand Word Thrills. This is compiled by Rachel Graham. I read this because Ryland, I feel like in my last video, it sounds like I'm saying Ryland. I do know her name. I apologize that it sounds wrong. Wrote a short story in this, and that's really why I wanted it. And I think she did an absolutely fantastic job. And for thinking of her as a romance person, heavily, I know she does like romance and thrillers. It was really fun to see her kind of feed into that. And I'm excited to see what her writing continues to be and how her book turns out. Overall, I think that this was really fun. I also really like that there's a hand in there. I just think that that was a cute little addition. Some of these, obviously, with any anthology, you're going to get your highs, you're going to get your lows. But I will say there were some really good ones in there, Ryland's included, that were actually really intriguing. I wouldn't mind a story a little bit longer, because they're all about 3-4 pages. It's like 8 pages total once you take in the story, and then the about the author, which I liked, seeing a little bit about each author. So I would really like, if you want just some pick-me-up short thriller stories throughout. I like that each one has a different context and then a different item that they can be chosen and written about. First one I read, which was for my March Run Roulette, was Night Bitch by Rachel Yoder. I did really like this. This is following a woman as she thinks she's turning into a dog, a wolf, and you're seeing her change and her connection with her child and some of the struggles that she goes through. So I do have a vlog about this if you want like a lot more detail on it, because otherwise we're going to be here forever. But I do think it was interesting, and I think that it had some good conversation about motherhood, kind of how feral motherhood can be, but also in a fun way. I was kind of expecting this off of some reviews that I had seen to really lean into the dark and gruesome. I think a little bit I was mixing it up with Tender as the Flesh. And it doesn't go quite as dark and gruesome as I thought it would go to. Not that that's necessarily a negative towards it. One I read from my local fantasy book club was How to Lose a Goblin in 10 Days by Jessie Silva. I did like this when I read it. It's not one that's really sticking to me. I could see this one becoming a series. This is fantasy romance, a cozy fantasy romance. There was things I liked about it. There was things that I didn't like about it. I think that overall the story and the characters were good. I wish the goblin market, some of that, I really wish that we could have delved into more of the worlds of the different characters. Let me back up and explain maybe what this is a little bit about. This is about Pansy and Wren. Pansy is a halfling who is inheriting a cottage from her grandmother. And she's finding out that Wren is a goblin and he's living in there. And goblins have this kind of like, I found it, it's mine kind of mentality. And the idea is that whoever leaves first then forfeits the cottage, and the other person gets the cottage. And in that time of them trying to do that, they slowly fall in love with each other. And I will say that the romance side of it, I liked that it wasn't overly sexual feeling. Like you really felt them kind of bond. Sorry, we had a grape interruption. But I like their slow connection, their slow bond, their slow interest in learning about each other. There were some conversations of maybe not judging others, but accepting others for differences in the way that they are. You get some of that. I think this was light. I think it was fun. I think there was some plot to it. It wasn't overly plot or world heavy. The Goblin Market was really fun. I wish more of that kind of vibes and feels were developed more into this. And overall, I would say this is a good one if somebody really likes a romance, likes a little bit of a fantasy romance. And just the way this is written, I could see this turning into a series and following her best friend. The next one I read is part of my TBR jar vlog video, so I'll have that linked. I won't go into too much detail, but that is Over the Woodward Wall by A. Deborah Baker. This is a middle grade series. It gives me a lot of the Wayward Children. This is following two kids, Zib and Avery. One's a boy, one's a girl. One's Avery's super predictable. Zib is a little bit more free-spirited, really wants an adventure, etc. And they are on their way to school. They get sidetracked due to construction, gas line leak, and they go over this wall into a world called the Up and Under. And they are following the improbable road and going on all these really big adventures. It gives me a little bit of Alice in Wonderland in some of the ways that the writing is told and the story is told. And I really enjoyed that. Again, if you want to see a lot more detail into those, go check out that video. Also, it's just a shameless plug for me because I love vlogging and I would love you to go watch them. So that was the first one in the series. It is a 4-book series. The next one is Along the Saltwise Sea. We're following still Avery and Zib as they are now on a ship and they're in the mouth of a whale and following again in their series. And I did forget to mention that at one point they meet this girl who is called Crow Girl and she's a murderer of crows. So she's a little girl and she can turn into a murderer of crows. So you're getting really lots of fun characters that way. And that would be that one. The third one is Into the Wind Racked Wilds. That is such a tongue twister. This is now following, again, it's just continuing their journey, but now they are up in the winds, in the clouds, and the winds have powers. They can make persuasions. They're going to see the queen. And just, again, the story is continuing to build. I love that each of these stories continues the overall journey on, but they're in their own world. You're getting to learn more about that. And one of the caveats is that they are told that if you come together, you leave together. You're in this together, so they can't just abandon one another. And then the last one is Under the Smoke Strewn Sky. And this one is them finding their way back to home. And again, just seeing more of the world and the realm in the Up and Under. You also really see some character development, how these kids are growing, how these are changing. Maybe some of the ways that Avery was very sheltered in his life is kind of growing, and the way that Zib was very free-spirited has changed him. So they are, in some ways, almost becoming more well-rounded in seeing the differences in the world. So that's the 4 for the Up and Under series, which I would really recommend, especially if you are into the Wayward Children series, or I'm kind of thinking as my son is getting close to middle school, that would be a really good middle grade introduction, especially introduction into maybe some of fantasy series, maybe an introduction into the Wayward Children series. Let's just follow along in that vlog. So this one is also part of that vlog. I Bet You Look Good in Coffin by Caddy Brent. This is the second in the Kitty Collins series. What I really love about this is it's dark, it's humorous. This is following Kitty Collins. In the first one, How to Kill Men and Get Away with It, Kitty Collins is a social media star, but she keeps ending up murdering people, and so she's kind of stopped her social media. She's developed this relationship, and we're following her to France as her mother's getting married, but she's also having this interaction online, being taunted by a man named Blaze Bundy, who is the epitome of what you see online as the manospheres guys, the super sexist, like just drive you mad and like women are nothing and property and just like piss you off. And she wrote that character to such a T. It was absolutely fantastic. But she's kind of like, I'm going to get my revenge. But she's in this like abused trauma women's support group and like they talk. But then at the same time, she's like, what are we going to do? She'll be like, we're going to kill him. Nope. We're going to get justice. We're not doing that. Oh, I'm so mad at him. What am I going to do? Kill him? Nope. And it's just like that moment, like she's like in her head, she's like, we're going to do that. No, we're not going to do that. You know, like she's trying to like grapple and become a better person. But like at the same time, she's like, that man deserves it. So it really leans into that dark humor and that fun, which I think that she did a fantastic job with. Another one, like, I love that one just as much as I love the first one. It doesn't feel redundant. It feels like kind of a new stage and a new growth and new challenges. There is a third one coming out later in the year, and I'm so excited for it. One that I read, Sign Here by Claudia Lux. Let me tell you, this is probably the biggest letdown of the month. So this is following Peyote Trip. He works in hell and he needs to get the like final soul in this family. But you're also getting to see it from that family's viewpoint of kind of why their souls may have been sold. And I think at the beginning, when you're seeing this from the hell viewpoint, it's hilarious. It's funny. It if you've ever watched The Good Place, and especially like the hell characters, like some of the stuff that they do where it's just like, for instance, this talks about the coffee pot's always broken and the pens never work, stuff like that. Or when you took their soul, well, did you tell them the terms and conditions? Well, no, I gave it to them and like told them they should read the terms and conditions, but they signed off to them. And they're like, well, nobody ever reads the terms and conditions. Well, I mean, like, that's not my fault. Or people will be like, signing contracts is hell. And well, they have no idea how right they are. So it's like really funny, but then you go to the viewpoint of the family whose soul they're trying to find, and they have obviously some secrets going on. They're not great people overall, let's be real. But the tone and the shift and the change in the story just really was jarring for me, and it didn't vibe in that way. And towards the end, even the hell people kind of lose that funny and change in a different way. So it was just something about the writing and the way that they were meshed together. It didn't work for me. It almost felt like two stories kind of mashed together to make into one. And it didn't quite work for me. And it was a letdown. However, one that did work for me and is my new favorite of the year so far, The Change by Kirsten Miller. Let me tell you, no critiques, no changes, no edits, perfection. This is following Harriet, Joe, and Nessa. They are older women. Love that. But Nessa's husband died a few years ago. She has two twin girls. And she knew that there was kind of this lore. There's a woman in each generation of her family. She knows this, who, as the quiet comes, they hear voices. And what they hear the voices of are victims that they need to go find justice for. There's Joe, who has this really supportive husband on paper and stuff. And like, he's a really great guy. They have a really great relationship. Her 11-year-old Lucy, hilarious. Hilarious, so sassy. And that's one thing I can say about this is all those ladies, perfection. They're snarky, they're humorous, they're strong, they're independent. Like, I just loved each of them in their own way. I love the way she wrote them. And this is one that like there is some like darkness and this humor, and the way she handles some of these darker moments, that they're really thoughtful, they're really insightful, but they can be funny and they can be lighthearted at moments, was really great. But let's get back to Joe. Her husband wants to be this like playwright. And so like in the more traditional sense, he's not really all that supportive. She's kind of the breadwinner, the one that takes care of everything, brings in the money, etc. As he's kind of going through his thing, which is fine. And she kind of recognizes that, but she can like harness her hot flashes for power. And then there's Harriet, who was this super high powered marketing exec, and her husband was also a marketing exec, but she finds out that her husband's like cheating on her. And so she's like, nope. She tries to go back into this world of marketing that's super sexist and running into this stuff. And she's just like, I don't have to do this. And so she goes and becomes one with nature and her flowers. One thing I love about this is how strong and independent all these women are. Some of the moments where they like say stuff and they're so poised. They're not mean in their critiques of people or when they're shutting someone down, but like they're so spot on that you can't argue, and like, they get their point across. I loved it. This is a 470-page thriller, and it is not so paced. There is a lot of side characters, and even they are well fleshed out. They are hearing the voices, and these three find each other, and turns out there's almost like an Epstein-like situation going on in their town, and they're going to figure out how to get revenge and get justice for all the victims, and you're following that. There is a little bit of a fantastical element to this, which throughout is also subtle, that I wouldn't really have been like, oh, this is a fantasy. Towards the very, very end, it does kind of build, and it builds in a way that I think really adds to the books, adds value to the story. It doesn't seem out of left field. It doesn't feel like too much. Like, it's just no critiques. Absolutely fantastic. please go read it and tell me how much you also love it. So those are all the books that were in that kind of vlog. One of them that I wanted to read was What Lies Between Us by John Mars. I'm a big John Mars fan, but I think what I have learned, or like the moment that I had with this, is I like John Mars when there's a science fiction element to his stories. This is falling to when Maggie and Nina, turns out Maggie and Nina are mother-daughter. Something has happened that the daughter feels that the mother needs to be chained up. Following along, like, what could this woman have done that was absolutely so terrible that you have to chain up, but like you wouldn't go to the cops? And there is a little bit of, to me, an unreliable narrator in this, and also that like you're all just terrible people. I think that this wasn't necessarily badly written in any way. I think it was a little slow paced. I think that we could have gotten to some of the points, maybe felt a little redundant at times. Overall, as a thriller, I think it's pretty good, but for what I hold John Mars to is kind of a little bit of a sci-fi element to it, and this one just kind of let me down. But like, not like, oh, I'm sad I read that. It was just like, oh, that was a little bit different what I was expecting, but like, I guess I liked it. I did recently finish Calabasas by R.F. Kuang. This is one that I probably would not have read before, but I read it for my local book club that's actually here in a couple of days, because this is April 1st that I'm filming this. And I have to say, I'm surprised. I like this. This is following two characters. Alice Law is a student of magic at Cambridge, and there's also another gentleman named Peter. Professor Grimes has kind of dark and maybe not the best person, but he doesn't give his students credit and does some very questionable stuff. But Alice is helping with a magic spell for him, and it goes wrong. He blows up and is in hell. And so they decide that they're going to go down to hell and get him back. I love the different elements of hell. I love that it's not the brimstone and fire that we think of. There was some stuff about. I like that also within it, they have kind of like Peter's map of it, Alice's map. So they don't really exactly know what hell looks like and what it is. They both have their theories and ideas, and they're going through that. They're running into different people. And there is a little bit of a like romance between Peter and Alice. I don't think it's ever, there's no smut. I don't think it ever takes over. I was a little bit worried throughout that it would, but I really love the world building in this more than anything. I like that it came from this academic way that they did it and talked about it. You saw things about like Dante's Inferno, like the way that they talked, or just different really philosophers in maybe relating that their experience or their hell to maybe why some of those philosophers think that way. And I think I was very pleasantly surprised by this, and now I'm kind of like, well, maybe I want to read Babel. I was more surprised and intrigued than I ever would have thought that I would have been. Another one I read was Murder Two Doors Down by Chuck Storla. This one I read for my cozy mystery bingo, which I'll do a final like review of like where I'm at in that in another video, so I won't go into that. But this is following a man who works for his HOA, but he's the president of his HOA, but he is an insurance fraud investigator. So my favorite part of that is he's now suspected. One of the neighbors turns up dead, and then more neighbors turn up dead, but he is the main suspect, and he's trying to prove the reason he's not his suspect. Also, can I just say his wife is just fucking horrible. Hated her. Which with the story makes sense. I loved the like, he's trying to do his innocence and just like throwing out these like random facts that like nobody knows. And they're like, well, how do you know this? He's like, well, it's kind of my job. I think that's hilarious. I think that he's very kind of like nerdy analytical data, like can throw out a percentage of like odds of death and this. And I think that is hilarious. So I think this was really funny. I think this was really lighthearted. I don't think that there's like a lot of depth into this, but I think it was fun. I also think it was fun that I read this at a time where I have never really had to deal with my HOA, but I wanted to put in a little free library, which vlog to come on that soon because I got approval for it. Hey. Anyways, and so I was having to deal with the HOA as far as like going to HOA meetings to make my proposal or go have some like side meetings with them to like work out the details of like where is it going to go? Like, is this work and that work? And just like seeing some of the stuff that I was like, yeah, I get it. I get the stereotypes of an HOA. So this is really fun if you just want kind of like a silly, funny murder mystery cozy thing with no high stakes and just kind of funny character building. The next one is The Mysterious Case of the Missing Crime Writer by Ragnar Johannesson. This is an Icelandic author who's writing Golden Age history. This is a little bit different than I'm used to. I had to listen to this because A lot of the character names are very Icelandic, as a couple of the words that they use and types are very Icelandic. So I think I was, because I thought this was going to be a little more lenient and cozy, which it wasn't. I also think I turned out that this is like in the middle of a series. So some of that where I was like, this character felt like I should know more than I did. It makes sense. So I think that some of this is me. Overall, there is a crime writer who has gone missing, and there is a detective now who has to solve it, and they have to solve it before it gets out. There's also a flashbacks in the past of something really dark that has gone on, and you know that somehow they're going to come together. You're just not really sure how. You're getting pieces, you're seeing it with the flashbacks, but then you're kind of seeing the detective figure it out. So overall, I think this is a good book. I think that maybe it wasn't one of my favorite because I'm not necessarily a huge Golden Age mystery reader, but I like it. So it's one of those, like, they're going to be enjoyable in that moment, just maybe not my favorite. And I also think that turns out this is kind of more in the middle of a series, and so maybe some of that character building that was kind of getting lost on me would have been more would have been better done if I had read all of them. The next one I read was Through the Gates of Garnet and Gold by Sean McGuire. This is the 11th in the Wayward Children series. Is this the last one? Because I feel like we saw so many, like it almost feels like there's one published every January. And normally, like, you can see the next year and there's not another one. And like, I would say the first chapter, I was like, this is kind of reading like a final. But this one is following Nancy. She's back in the Hall of the Dead. However, something's gone bad in the Hall of the Dead, and she has to go back to the Wayward house and get help from Cade and Sumi and all those characters, which is the first one where they've been in their door and gone back. I think that, again, you're really getting to see all those main characters. You're getting to live in the worlds. I think the pacing's good. I think if you like the characters, I just think that, like, if you're at book 11, you're probably going to like it and you're going to enjoy it. I just need to know, is there more? Okay, good thing we're on the last one because sitting on the floor is starting to hurt. And the last one was Bloom by Delilah S. Dawson. I saw this first because of Spill the Reads, and then Gavin Reads It All I saw read it. And as you can see, I tabbed the crap out of this. Loved. So loved. Perfect size, perfect pacing. This is following a woman who she's recently been dumped because he's a cheating man. And she kind of decides, I'm going to take a step back, go to a smaller town. She's at a farmer's market in this little town and meets a woman at this market. She goes by Ro, but her name is Rosemary. And she meets Ash at this farmer's market. And just, she's never been into women, but all of a sudden she's just mesmerized by the most beautiful woman in the world. She's like, just really wants this woman's attention, and something's drawing her in. And you're seeing this kind of relationship budding that's turning a little sexual. And like, you are seeing as a character a lot of really red flags that maybe Ash is not the best. And knowing that it's a horror, you're like, oh my gosh, what is coming? And it builds. And while this is short, and I would say really a lot of the thick, gruesome stuff happens in the end, I think it's still paced right. I think it's still like throughout the story as things are happening, you're getting a little bit closer and you're like, oh, is this the moment? Nope. Okay. We are almost there. Oh no. And the way that this ends, things will be happening, and you get a little bit of the back story behind the horror of it all. I don't want to say anything because I don't want to spoil it. And you're like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. But let me tell you, that ain't the only one. The way that this ended, never saw that coming. The pacing, the vibes, all of this was so fantastic. Perfect for a pint size. I really loved the character development in this. I think it was intriguing that even though it was so short, you really felt the eerie vibes. You felt the connection between them, but yet that something was off. The way that they wrote this farmer's market or Ash's house, like, you really felt like you were there and you could feel it. And I think that the writing in this it was almost a poetic, like it was kind of descriptive in different ways in the way that it talked, but yet it didn't feel like, it wasn't too flowery or fluffy, a little bit fairy tale-esque in its writing at times. And I think that it was fantastic. Now that is officially finished, that was a lot of books. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for sticking it out. Any vlog specific to this, I do try and make shorts to all the books that I read, just so that I can reference them. Really, you can find those in video links down below. Let me know what your favorite book was that you read last month. Have you read any of these books? And as always, I love me a great book recommendation. So please leave that in the comments down below, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, witches.